Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Retail Perch powered by the people at Birdzi. I'm Courtney Adams, the VP of Marketing, and I'm here today with Kate McCormick. Hi, Kate.
Hey, Courtney, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, today we're talking about something really interesting that most people don't question, but probably should. Why does it take so long to get anything done in retail? If you have ever built a campaign, pulled together an audience, or tried to act on customer data, you know it's not a quick process. There is, currently most systems, there's considerable operational lag. Kate, your career has been spent deep in retail operations and strategy. You've really helped shape my knowledge of all of this here. But before we get started, can you give a quick overview of your professional experience and what you do for Birdseye?
Sure. I am the director of solution engineering, and what that is it's really about helping retail partners get the most out of our solutions so they can better serve their shoppers. A big part of my role is understanding what each retailer is trying to achieve and then translating it into practical ways that you can actually use or our solution in their day-to-day operations. So I've spent over 15 years working in the grocery industry, and I've seen a lot of different approaches and challenges, especially when it comes to operations.
Yeah, it's an incredible background you have. Thanks for bringing it to us. We are so glad to have you on the team. When people hear operations, you and I have discussed, I think that they really underestimate what it actually means day to day.
I totally agree. It's interesting. Once we start calling day-to-day operations a process, it makes them sound just really linear, really manageable, almost simple. Where things get underestimated is when retailers look at operations at the process level instead of the individual steps. I think the reason is because each step can feel too small to focus on. So that's what, a lot of them get overlooked. In grocery operations, there are 1,000 moving parts across teams, systems, technologies, and they all have to come together at once for hundreds of thousands or even millions of shoppers. So the challenge is really the scale. It keeps everyone thinking a little too high level, the process level. And the retailers that drill down and evaluate the steps underneath, those are the ones that can actually handle operating at that size and scale.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's what really surprised me. I come at this from the marketing side, which is, also dozens of steps, multiple calendars to coordinate across different teams and systems. But the scale is, significantly different. My audience is hundreds, maybe a couple thousand, but not millions. So when I think about process, design takes time, campaigns take time. Process is inevitable, and I get that. But the scale of shoppers, it's a completely different operational lift in grocery.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where it starts to break down. When operations get that complex, it's easy to just accept how long things take today. And if there's a solution for today, most retailers don't prioritize finding an even better one for tomorrow. There's just too many things to focus on.
And Kate, how does the word today change the way retailers should really be thinking about operational strategy?
In my experience, introducing today, it can really be a difference between having an impractical operational strategy and one that's truly sustainable.
It's such a small word, but it really does change everything, right? I mean, wow.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about the operations behind filling your home with food, priorities might vary by household, sure, lowest cost, least processed, highest quality, things like that. But there's one thing no household says. It's filling my home with food needs to be as tedious and time consuming as possible.
Right. No one is waking up going, how can I add more things to my daily to-do list?
Right.
Everyone that I know is aiming, and I'm included, is aiming for efficiency.
Exactly. And evaluating retail operational strategies, it should honestly be no different. Again, the priorities may vary. Retailers might aim for personalized experience, a more optimized investment, getting to data-driven decision making. But the need for efficiency should remain the exact same. Everyone knows that retail behavior can change really quickly, especially grocery, and grocers simply can't afford adding any more on their to-do list either. Just like in our everyday lives, operations shouldn't take any longer than what's absolutely necessary. But I think in grocery retail, and the operations behind it, there's this bit of misconception on what longer than what's absolutely necessary can actually mean.
And this is, where it starts to feel real. It's like there always needs to be a constant evaluation of just how long things are really taking. And that's a process in itself, but, retail doesn't wait.
No, and by asking how do we do this today, retailers can really start to see where the friction exists across their operational strategies, where the steps, the individual ones, take days, weeks, or even months. And it's that perspective that helps identify where execution is slowing a retailer down, where the strategy might be preventing retailers from keeping up with the speed of retail, and where it's actually keeping pace.
Kate, that is such a good litmus test. It's almost like today becomes, a pressure valve for your entire operation. And that simple shift, it's actually pretty transformational. Because the second you start thinking, like, how do we get this done today? You really start to notice the places where things don't function that way. And a lot of that comes back to something we don't always question, which is business as usual. We just do it, right? The processes, the workflows, the way things get done, we just do it because it's how it's always been done. And, Kate, I'd be curious to know, like, where do you see the biggest challenges and traps of business as usual in grocery retail today?
I would say that the honestly the biggest trap is in business as usual is really treating processes as business as usual in the first place. That's where operational strategies start turning into what I would consider an operational manual. What should be a mindset of continuous improvement, it becomes like a one-time project or a periodic initiative where you're setting the static goal to hit and then you're moving on. And the results with this approach is that over time, teams stop asking whether there's a better way. And that's, in my opinion, where efficiency really starts to slowly die.
Hmm. That's such a good way to put that. And my mind immediately goes to transformation on how we communicate. Business as usual used to mean that meeting someone, in person, writing a letter, making a phone call. Like, I still do all those things, but as life has gotten busier and communications need, you know, grew more complex, texting and emails emerged. I mean, remember trying to text on a flip phone? I'm just doing it right now. Or BlackBerry, like,
Yeah,
pressing the
true.
same key multiple times to
Yes.
get to that right letter, or like typing on that tiny little keyboard and then having to double check on that tiny little screen. That was business as usual at the time. And I am so happy that it's not anymore.
Yes, I would lose my mind. Progress happened because, someone kept asking there has to be a better way. And in grocery retail, we need to keep thinking the same way.
But we're really not, at least not consistently, right?
Yeah, no, we're not. If you think about, customer insights and take that as a component of retail operations, most organizations rely on dashboards, BI tools, partnerships, in-house analytic teams, all of the above.
Mm.
Yes, those systems all serve a purpose and they achieve an operational strategy of using customer data to drive better business decisions. But just like the phone, customer insight needs are evolving. They're shifting from statements to conversations, and there's a common limitation across all the business as usual approaches. The operational strategy is still kind of typically designed to answer a single step question, get a single statement, and it's not officially efficiently set up to explore the questions that inevitably follow. I mean, there's always another meeting that has to be set up to do that.
Oh, my word, the number of meetings. It can be insane the number of meetings scheduled on my end to plan, build, and execute our marketing strategy. I can't imagine like how many there would be if you're using customer data to drive that, better decision making. I mean, to make a better decision, you need to feel like you have all the information and the answers first. And if you're looking at customer data, it's kind of a whole vast of
100%.
opportunities. Yeah.
I mean, I've been in those boardroom meetings and those presentations, and preparing for them could take weeks or months trying to anticipate every single possible exploration path or follow-up question. And sitting there, I always had two thoughts running through my mind. One, this data is already getting really old. And two, I hope there isn't a path or question I didn't prepare for.
That is just gave me like I feel it like yeah, it's a terrible feeling, and it kind of it brings me back though, like to what we talked about earlier, like there has to be a better way.
Yeah, and that's what business as usual can do to an operational strategy. It prevents that progress toward being a better way. Operations can grow static, execution, it'll stay tedious, and uncovering insights, the example we keep talking about, it ends up slowing down the overall pace at which those decisions actually need to be made to make a difference to begin with.
Because retailers, it's not like they don't have data or even tools, but it's the way that they interact with data and tools that really hasn't kept up. It's
Yep.
Yeah, like there's really something, like where our AskKea solution comes in, because it's about making that interaction more conversational and more real time. So you can actually move from insight to action with all of that lag in between.
Exactly. And at Birdseye, we took this exact same approach when evolving the business as usual of uncovering customer insights and making decisions. We asked, what do we have available today? And
Mhm.
then how can we enable in the moment responses that evolving customer insights need? The one that prevents an extra meeting, that multi-week preparation, that lag in decision making. And what we found was that the answer wasn't another dashboard or a BI tool. I mean, retailers, we already have those. What was missing was a more conversational, real-time way to explore and discuss all of the insights that were being uncovered, and that's what led to AskKea.
So powerful to hear that what we've been talking about has actually, been brought to life. But I do want to touch on that idea of lag and decision making a little more. Whether it's business as usual or not, the time spent on day-to-day operations can extend the time it takes a retailer to action. So I get that process is important and errors need to be prevented, but when does it get to be too long?
Sure. I mean, as we talked about earlier, no one intentionally designs operations to be tedious. If we think back, to your example, Courtney, of texting on old flip phones, pressing that key multiple times to get that letter. At one point, that was simply how things worked. It was a temporary means to an end as the communication channels were evolving until someone figured out a faster, less tedious way. But in grocery retail, it often seems like the opposite's happening.
Yeah, I can see that. Like it's almost if it takes longer or it's more complex, the process, starts to signal operational quality and sophistication or even advancement. But the steps you take, the the more steps you take, the better the end action must be, right? Like that's the thought. That's
Yeah.
not really true.
I mean, from my perspective,
Hmm.
operational quality shouldn't really be measured by how long a process takes, how
Hmm.
many steps it has in it, or even like how many automation tools are kind of strung together to get a quicker solution. It should be measured by how little distance there is between insight and action. I've I've seen analyses take up to 8 weeks. Offer pools can take up to 10 weeks to build, weekly circulars, 13 weeks to finalize. Instead of reimagining what the operations could or should be, retailers just have often added on to what already existed, adding one more data source or one more step in the process, one more automation tool.
I mean, 13 weeks.
Yes.
Everything's old. Everything you started with 13 weeks ago is no longer accurate.
Right, right.
Everybody's moved on. So just like grocery shopping, the flip phone or AskKea, if we keep adding to an already tedious process, we never get to that moment of there has to be a better way.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Instead, retailers use the phrase, that's how we've always done it,
Mm.
which can be a silent assassin to designing a sustainable operational strategy. And with the technology available today, all the buzzwords we've been hearing throughout the years, automation, unified data platforms, AI, you name it, I think retailers should expect far more efficient operational strategies, the strategies that can, let them move at the speed of retail, not slow them down.
It's the Retail Perch, presented by Birdzi, where grocery meets actionable intelligence.
I mean, Kate, if Amazon can deliver anything for 250 million shoppers in, whatever they buy in 2 days or less, uh, why aren't grocery retailers able to manage their day-to-day operations within that same time frame?
Honestly, there's a great rule of thumb to that, Courtney, and one retailers should really consider. Any operational deliverable that takes more than 2 days is worth evaluating. It takes customers a split second to decide where to shop. Retailers need to make sure that their operational strategies, their day-to-days, are set up to react to it. Maybe not as quickly as, a split second, but as quickly as possible.
So why don't they? Like, why rest on business as usual? Why rest on the way we've always done it?
Well, across the retailers I've worked with, there's usually three reasons organizations are slow to change operational strategies. The first one I've encountered is that they've already invested so much in the current operations. So even if they're inefficient, people remember the time, effort, resources it took to build them. And it's kind of like replacing it would feel overwhelming. And so teams just stick with what exists. The challenge is that retailer operations, they happen weekly, often daily. So those inefficient operations can really compound pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, change is uncomfortable. It isn't something people always openly embrace, especially when the how change needs to happen isn't always crystal clear.
Right.
If you take, again, the operations of the cell phone, the idea of switching the process from pushing buttons to swiping screens ended up changing the way the entire phone was built.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me into the second reason I often hear, the perceived risk of change often outweighs the reward of improvement. There's something just comforting, safe about operating the way we've always done it, and it's familiar. In the case of the cell phone, changing how a person operated a phone completely, it opened up even more opportunities for what they ended up using the phones for, email, social media, all of those types of things. So I think in addition to understanding the risk of changing, retailers need to also understand the risks of not changing. How slow is your decision making? How tedious are the process that you're going to have to endure? What missed opportunities for growth you might have?
Yeah, it feels totally counterintuitive to me, Kate. I mean, call me crazy, but I don't think that I've come across a retailer that wants to maintain year over year sales. There's
True.
always a push to grow them. So if they want to grow, why not evaluate current operations to see where technology and AI can help them?
Yep, and that's the last reason that I'm starting to actually hear more frequently.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's a fear that greater efficiency makes individuals redundant or replaceable. because individuals often tie their value to the organization with their current state operations. In reality, though, I've actually witnessed the opposite happening when improving operational strategy. Sure, automation and AI can remove the more tedious work, and it might end up taking a majority of a person's time, which might be the main driver that a role would be created in the first place. However, what's less understood is that these same people can then focus on higher value future state operations. AI cannot replace asking the right questions. It can't replace interpreting insights, identifying opportunities, connecting it to your business to make your better decisions. So instead of automation and AI strictly focusing on expediting old processes and day to day operations, it can really transform the way a retailer does business for the benefit of their employees, not for the reduction. What was once a role focused on making ends meet, it evolves into one of those broader impacts on the business as a whole.
I'm really glad you touched on that. Human to human, this technology, I've heard, it can
Yep.
just, you covered it. I'm really glad you did. So, if retailers can shift their mindset and move past their initial reason for reluctance, what actually changes?
So I often joke that improving operational strategy is about saving souls. Every organization has steps that make people sigh the moment they think about doing them. The ones that drain the energy, the ones that make the path from point A to point B just ridiculously long. Those are exactly the steps that should be redesigned or eliminated. They're the points where your operational strategy starts working against you instead of for you. Because once you get to point B, the next thing you're going to have to deal with is getting to point C, point D, and so on. So, retailers who remove that friction within their operational strategies today are usually the ones that move faster than anyone else tomorrow. Of course, it's often easier said than done.
Sure. But I love that, saving souls, because it's true. Everyone knows that steps, knows those processes and those just, I mean, they're in my head right now, like when you're talking about it, the ones that you dread before you even start. And you're right. The idea of transforming an operational strategy, it's got to feel daunting. We've talked about, operations cover everything.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of SKUs, customers, sometimes locations. It's a lot. So, with that in mind, what are a few questions that retailers can start asking themselves as they begin to rethink their operational strategies?
And that's a great question. And one I'd honestly challenge business owners to keep as simple and objective as possible. The first one, and we talked about this at the beginning, the first question I would have everyone ask is, if we were building this process today, would we build it the same way? I think operational strategies should evolve. What works today was often built for a different moment or different technology, different pressures. If retailers come in with the mindset that there might be a better way, oftentimes they'll find that there is.
Yeah, that's a really good reset. It's like business as usual should be renamed business today.
Yes, I totally agree.
Hmm.
The second question I would say is, ask yourself what in our operations takes days or weeks that should take hours. Any deliverable, as we talked to, rule of thumb, Amazon, any deliverable that takes multiple days is worth evaluating. One caveat here is that automation might help, but it is not the answer for everything. Sometimes the better solution, similar to AskKea, is rethinking the operational process entirely, keeping the primary goal in mind, but just flipping it straight over on its head.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that concept of swiping screens instead of pushing buttons, just taking a step back can often bring that huge leap into the future that's needed.
Exactly. And then finally, I would say the third question would be, are we improving operations or just adding another page to the manual? So, as we talked earlier, real progress often requires change that looks different from what came before. Evolution, I think, is really good. Sometimes revolution is completely necessary, with the texting. If every improvement simply adds another step to the same process, I don't think you're transforming operations. You're just making the manual longer.
Yeah. And that one just sort of exposes everything. Are we adding a page or are we turning a corner? If we stop defining operational quality or sophistication by the number of sources or steps and start finding ways to streamline operational strategies and processes, retailers will really be ready to act.
And if something is taking days, weeks, or months, it's 100% worth asking a very simple question. Is there a better way to do this today? It can make or break the success of your operational strategy.
Kate, this was just such a great conversation, and thank you for those 3 questions. I think that will be really helpful. I appreciate everybody joining the Retail Perch today. If processes feel harder or slower than they should, it's probably worth asking why. We're going to continue these conversations with insights from grocery retail experts and beyond, and we'll bring in more of the Birdzi team to dive deeper into how retailers can actually reduce that operational friction and move faster from insight to action. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on the Retail Perch.
Thanks for listening to The Retail Perch. Follow us on LinkedIn at The Retail Perch for new episodes and updates. For more resources, visit birdseye.com. Catch you next time.